Stas23 here. In today's Knife Therapy, I bring you the Terzuola Tactical ATCF Lite. This knife comes in at $99.95, and I think you can only get it at Blade HQ, or at least that's where it's at right now. And this one's kind of special because Bob Terzuola, he is the godfather of tactical. He coined the term tactical knife. And whenever I first got into the YouTube scene, or really into the knife hobby, it was Bob Terzuola and Loveless. So those are the two huge names that, you know, are the living legends. And they definitely have contributed so much design influence into the knife community that you'd be surprised if you don't know much about them. The OEM is We Knives for these, kind of like we see with the Ferrum Forge branded knives that are produced by We, same type of thing. And this particular knife comes in a whole bunch of different variations. I'll start popping them up on the screen. You have a natural G10 with a stonewash blade or black blade. You got tan G10 with a stonewash blade or black blade. Blacked out, you have a black G10 with a stonewash blade. You have blue G10 with a stonewash blade and a black blade. Green G10 with a stonewash blade and a black blade. 10 different variations in total. That's a lot. Let's get some specs out of the way so you know the size of this knife. You have a total length of 6.78 inches, so it's in that medium to smaller range. You have a blade length just shy of 3 inches at 2.96 inches, so it's going to be legal in a lot of areas that have 3 and under blade laws. Your grip area from right here up against that flipper tab to the back of the handle is 3.37 inches, so if you have large, extra large hands, this might be a little too small for you. The handle scale thickness is very, very slender from here to here at 0.396. Average is 0.5, so that's very thin. You have a closed width in the pocket of pretty narrow, 1.06 inches. Your blade stock thickness is 0.119, so pretty thin. And the behind the edge thickness on my particular knife ranges from 14 to 15 thousandths. The ATCF model is Bob Terzuola's most popular model, and it's his first tactical folding knife that he made. If you wanted to get one of his actual customs, they range anywhere from $1,400 and up, and not to mention they're kind of hard to obtain unless you get them on the secondary market. ProTech released this year, I think it was, the Auto ATCF. However, it's pricey as well, starting at $480 all the way up to $1,600. So it's almost like one of his own customs. So it's cool to see a more affordable version. Still not cheap, but it's not outrageous. And it's definitely, you know, going to be doable for a lot more people. Let's take a look. You have this attractive drop point blade. This is in Nitro V stainless steel, which is a very solid, you know, used on some customs, but it's a solid budget steel for sure, especially done right. And you'll see that later in the actual testing. You have a high flat grind, comes down to a pretty thin geometry. You have a nice needle-like point right there, but it's not dainty. Good for piercing or doing, you know, your detailed drag cuts. You have dual fullers on both sides. You have a very small sharpening notch. Does clear the plunge, and it might give you a couple of sharpenings before it starts to widen up in the back over here. You have a thumb ramp, just a slight thumb ramp, kind of like the Les George VECP somewhat. And you do have some jimping there. The coated blade it's not aggressive. I call it mild traction, but that ramp kind of locks you in there in place. Now it's time to see what this knife can do, and you're going to want to check this out. Came with a pretty impressive factory edge, and that's one thing I love about Nitro V. You can get it ridiculously sharp, and it responds very well to a strop. It sliced very well through the cardboard. It was comfortable, even though I was worried about the thin, narrow handle scales, you know, being tough to get a good grip on it, but no problem whatsoever. And it had a decent bit of bite, at least into the cardboard. Now once I started to test the ergos and the pine 2x4, that's whenever that thin handle was pretty hard to grip without, it felt like it was going to spin in my hand unless I gripped it very, very tightly, but then it started to cramp up my forearms. However, this is a light duty EDC knife. I can't fault it for that. I think it performed well, you know, due to how thin it was. It still performed well, it just was a little harder to hold on to. Even though this wasn't the cleanest rope cutting, I was surprised on how well it did. It had some bite left in that edge. It's probably the best Nitro V factory edge that I've gotten from a WE OEM knife. I ended up making 40 cuts through the 1/2 inch twisted sisal rope, which is phenomenal for, you know, a under $100 knife. And I did find though that that thumb ramp was pretty uncomfortable in the pinch grip. Whenever I was thrusting down into that rope, it was driving it into the palm of my hand. But once again, I don't really think that that's what this knife is geared for. You know, your light task, do a few cuts and then be done. The knife has the perfect amount of belly to cut on the flat surface, doing the slicing motions, doing the push down motions. It all worked fairly well, and I thought the knife was really performing well so far. The belly made these utility cuts easy, and cutting down on the flat surface easy as well. The edge is still going strong at this point. However, you'll see in a second, whenever I get to the rubber tubing, I did notice that the coated blade was bonding up on the sidewalls of that tubing pretty quickly. You know, not the end of the world unless you're doing a lot of, you know, cutting with material that's going to be rubbing against the side of the primary grind. But it gets through it, and I was thinking it might have been the edge, but once I got past that rubber and we go to that corner cardboard, it goes through there so fast, and I was pretty darn impressed. This is how I know, you know, I've tested lots of Nitro V from WE, and like I said, this one has definitely been the best I've tested, or at least factory edges I've tested so far, and still has bite going through this denim. Doing very, very well, and I guarantee you I could drop it back up to a very workable edge after I'm done with this. Alright, now that we did the cutting, let's talk about the deployment and action of this little guy. It's riding on ceramic ball bearings and a ceramic detent ball. It's a pretty light blade, just to give a few shakes to get it to go down. It's got a very minimal flipper tab with jimping on there, easy to get to, and comes out pretty nice and quick. It's got a nice positive detent to it. Nice little positive click. You can use the fullers to flick it out very easily, and you can reverse flick it as well. It has enough lip, and you can actually see my fingernail kind of getting caught up on there. So nicely done. I love the slim, you know, form factor of it all, and the narrow form factor of it all. It's pretty much it disappears in the pocket. Now let's check out the G10. You have a peel ply G10, what I'd call that a mild traction, medium traction. Maybe it's not super grippy, but it does its job by giving you some extra texture. You have the Terzuola logo on the pivot, which I think is a nice little touch. You have T6 on the G10 scale screws, and you have a loop over deep carry pocket clip that is tip up, left or right hand carry. You can see how they got the little notch right there. Now let's check it out in the pocket. Now I found it goes in and out of the pocket nicely. You have just the right amount of ramp, unless you have some super thick pants or something, but just give it a shove into the pocket, and pretty much buries that little corner, comes up with just a hair, but you have the Terzuola name on the pocket clip. I could have done without that. And we'll touch back up on the ergos real quick. I talked about them in the actual testing. It's comfortable for light duty tasks. You have a very thin handle and a very narrow handle, so when you're doing a lot of cutting where you're you're exerting a lot of force into the cut, it's going to require you to really hold on to this handle very, very tightly. And prolonged use like that, it's going to start to cramp up your forearms, or it actually might start turning in the hand. Now, I don't see that to be a problem, because at this size, I don't look at it as a tactical folder, or I don't look at it as a hard use folder. I look at it as a light duty EDC knife where you're going to pull it out, cut something, put it back in your pocket, and be done with it. Now, whenever I was cutting down in the pinch grip, cutting the rope, I did notice that the peak of this right here was wearing out the palm of my hand. But once again, I'm not going to be doing prolonged cutting of rope with something this small. I'll find something a little bit more hand feeling. At least that's how I would look. That's what I look for whenever I'm cutting something like that. Your liners on this one are black as well. You have a green G10 backspacer with a hidden lanyard post right there. Your liners are not skeletonized, as you can see, but such a small knife, it's not heavy whatsoever. Let's check it out on the scale. First off, in grams, 82.6 grams and 2.91 ounces. Yeah, super featherweight. Wore it in my basketball shorts several times and forgot it was there. Now let's check out the lockup. It's sitting at around, I'd say 30–40%. I can flex side to side just because of how thin this is, but absolutely rock solid, no play up or down, and that side to side, in my opinion, for this size knife is not an issue. It's not going to disengage on me. Access to the lock bar, I definitely wish it was a little bit better, because these two, even though it has this cutout, that liner is pretty much flush with the show side scale. I can do it with my thumb. It's not uncomfortable. But I definitely wish it had a little bit more access. It'd be a little bit easier, but it's not the worst I've ever seen either, and it's not super uncomfortable. Quick size comparisons. We have the Ferrum Forge Stinger and the Ferrum Forge Prolix. It's probably the same, about the same blade length as the Prolix, but you're getting more cutting edge since you don't have that forward choil, and it's overall longer than the Prolix, but smaller than the Stinger. Ontario Rat Model 2 and the Ferrum Forge Mini Archbishop. The Rat 2 is very similar in overall length and size, about the same grip area as the Rat 2, except much more comfortable because it's not a huge, deep choil. And lastly, we have the Civivi Elementum. The Elementum is just a hair longer. I'd say you have about the same cutting edge as the Elementum, because you have that bigger sharpening choil, but you have more grip area on the Elementum. So nitpicks and complaints. Of course, I would have loved to see this thing just a little bit longer. Other than that, I like the aesthetic of this. I don't really see that to be a problem as I talked about it. Only thing that I did notice, and it's not something you really come in contact much, but this little area right here, it just kind of throws my visual appearance off a little bit, and it's not sharp, but it's a little pokey right there, but it's not something that comes in contact with my palm or anything, or I feel whenever I'm using it. So it's just a nitpick. That's all. Overall value of the knife, at $100, I know, yes, that is pricey for a Nitro V knife of this size and all that good jazz, but just like you see with Ferrum Forge knives, they're branded by that company, Ferrum Forge and Terzuola knives. So they're gonna be they're paying for the OEM work, and then they're gonna tack on whatever they're worth. And Bob Terzuola is arguably one of the most famous guys in the knife world, especially that is still alive. He is an absolute goat, and definitely am happy to have something that he designed in my possession. I know he did some with drop, and I never did pick up any of those. I kind of wish I would have, because there's one that I liked. But you can still get some of them on the new, whoever took over, drop.com. So there you go. I think it's a good buy. It's one that I could recommend if you're looking for a smaller, under 3-inch bladed knife. You know, I think it's attractive, comfortable for light duty tasks, good action, good slicer. Yeah. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them down below. I hope everybody's having an absolute amazing day. I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.